This article about the 1989 Mr. Olympia contest comes from the December 1989 issue of IronMan Magazine. It was written by Lonnie Teper, and photography was by Michael Neveux. And the title is Fit to be Tied. Lee Haney ties Arnold's Olympia record in Rimini with his sixth straight victory. Rimini, Italy. Mamma mia, what a trip. I mean, just last year, it took me only an hour to land and return from Joe Weider's Mr. Olympia in Los Angeles. A 45-minute round-trip trek in my good old auto. Let me put things in a better perspective, amigo. Mike Neveux and I spent more time in actual travel one way this season than the entire duration of the 88 event, from opening the car door to having the final results in my hands at the end of the evening. You want some numbers? How about nearly 21,000 miles up and back? How about 23 hours in the air? How about another 15 in the rent a station wagon? Of course, last season I didn't get to lay waste to gobs of Italian cuisine for 9 days or set new standards of sugar consumption by attacking the world's finest dessert trays. And I never got the opportunity to view some of the preeminent historical landmarks in the universe, as I did during the pre-contest tour John Balick set up for Mike and me that took us through Lake Como, Verona, Padua, Venice, and Florence. Man, it was eerie standing in the arena in Verona, imagining the Christians, no, not Mike dummies, battling the Lions, no, not Samir muscleheads. And it was special viewing the House Juliet, no, not Bergman knuckleheads, occupied during her time with Romeo, no, not DeMay, Ray, or Marsh fools. And all the beautifully constructed churches that filled every stop with artistry. Now, when I tell people I took a boat ride in Venice, they won't think I went fishing just south of the Santa Monica Pier. When I tell people I actually saw David, they won't think I'm referring to David Brown, the singing Marine from San Diego Way, one of the U.S.'s more sculptured amateur middleweight bodybuilders. But all good things must come to an end, and when the sightseeing was over, the cuisine consumptions never did cease. It was time to check out the chiseled physiques of the 21 men who took the stage at this year's show. First of all, let me tell you who didn't enter. Gary Stridham, who figured to be a legitimate threat to stop Lee Haney's 5-year win streak, was home working in his clothing office in California. Too much business happening, said Gary. Vince Comerford, who assured us all in Iron Man's October cover story that the blonde myth is back, was back all right, back home in Mesa, Arizona, nursing a torn glute. A torn glute? Yeah, I never heard of this one either, but supposedly Vince got medical verification. Nimrod King and Renelle Janvier arrived at the Grand Hotel in Rimini, but neither got on stage. King got an infection in the shoulder region and was advised to withdraw, and Renelle was in the hotel's bathroom vomiting while the rest of the fellows were on the prejudging flexing. Stomach flu, I guess. Now, let's get right to the point. Throughout the week, the athletes were telling anyone who would listen that they were all in the best shape of their lives. Sorry to disagree with you guys, but as one judge put it, the show looked great on paper, but it didn't turn out that way. What the evaluator meant was simply this. The condition of the entrance was disappointing. No one was better than the year before, and several weren't even close. I'll make one excuse for the boys, though. The lighting certainly didn't do them any favors. Which brings me to another point. Why was the illumination so poor at almost every show this year? We need to take a long, hard look at this problem, officials. Another negative. The stage was so high, all the media viewed the athletes from the knees up. Hey, isn't this contest the granddaddy of them all? Imagine photographers running to the edge of the stage and then firing their cameras straight up in hopes of getting full body pictures. Or writers resembling pogo sticks as they attempted to get a look at the athletes' entire physiques. There were a few firsts for the contest, too. The show was held over 2 days. The judging took place on Friday night, September 8th, in an auditorium that was so baking that some of the athletes, like Mike Quinn for one, were dripping from head to toe midway through the affair. I see the point here. Money. And the 2-day strategy worked, resulting in a much larger prejudging crowd than usual. I doubt if the athletes endorse this procedure for the future, however. Additionally, there was a 30-foot runway at the base of the stage on which the athletes galloped up and down throughout the evening to give the fans a lot more for their money. And the judges were housed in an enclosed area between the stage and the stands. I guess this was so disgruntled fans couldn't throw things at them if they didn't like their selections. Earlier in the week, with all the bodybuilders boasting to show in my greatest shape ever, it had appeared that the contest would wind up being a real nightmare for the judging panel. This headache, however, never materialized, and from early on, the judges made it clear that the battle for the top slots would be among Haney, Lee Labrada, Rich Gaspari, Vince Taylor, Mike Christian, and Mohammed Benaziza. Haney, the overwhelming choice to tie Arnold's record for most consecutive victories, added 10 pounds to the 246 he carried a year ago, and he wasn't better for it. Like most of the other athletes, Haney didn't have the detail that he's shown in the past, but with that massive chest and back, it was clear he was still the man to beat. Gaspari, who weighed 207 when he scored his third consecutive runner-up spot to Haney in '88, tipped the scales at 219 this time around. Remember, 2 years ago, the 5'8" Dynamo from New Jersey entered at 214, and even though he did manage to nab second, he didn't look as good as in years past. He said he would never go that high again, and he was true to his word at last year's show and the Arnold Classic, where he scored a victory weighing 205. I've always felt that Gaspari needs to be under 210 to have a chance of taking it all. Oh, he certainly was bigger than ever before, but the added poundage took away most of Rich's edges over folks in the past, i.e. his freaky hardness and density. Labrada was one of the few who showed up looking as good as the year before. Lee and Austria's Andreas Munzer were the only two athletes in the show who were at their best on stage. More on Andreas later. Labrada said he wanted to add a few pounds in his attempt, and he was up to 182 in Rimini. He weighed in at 175 in Los Angeles. The extra weight did nothing to detract from Labrada's outstanding symmetry and condition, and it was clear he was in the hunt for a top 3 spot. Taylor, the '88 Nationals champ and victor at this year's Night of the Champions in his pro debut, was in the hunt because of his great shape, which was set off by those wonderful calves. And even though Vince weighed 2 pounds less than the 210 he weighed at the NOC, he wasn't as tight. Christian's legs and back didn't have the sharpness he displayed during the European tour earlier in the year, but his upper body density never fails to make Mike a top contender. Christian claimed to weigh 247 in Italy, but more weight doesn't mean more quality in many cases, as a few of the contenders so vividly proved. Benaziza, the mighty mite from Algeria, was the most overlooked dude in the Olympia last year, but it was clear the judges were ready to make amends. He had the most pure muscle in the show from top to bottom, and it was just a question of how much his overall shape would detract from the beef. By the call-outs on Friday, it was easy to see that the remaining 4 of the top 10 countdown would be between Quinn, Brian Buchanan, Samir Bannout, and Ron Love. Of the 4, Bannout presented the best conditioned physique. Samir was hard, no doubt about it, but the added poundage landed in his midsection, and the blocky look once again prevented a higher finish. Quinn also came in a few pounds heavier than '88 when he stunned the bodybuilding world with a 6th-place finish. Although a tad bigger in the lower body, Mike was not as sharp as last year. The same can be said for Love. Like Buchanan, he of the sensational waist-to-shoulder taper who followed Quinn in the standings last year, Love was in about the same shape as in '88. At the finals, the Italian fans, who made up a large part of the near-capacity crowd, got a special treat when the MC brought Franco Colombo on stage. The 2-time Mr. Olympia, who was raised in Sardinia, spoke for a few minutes and then complied when the MC requested he take his shirt off and hit a few poses for the disciples. Okay, so Franco ain't quite what he used to be, but he was still in better shape than a few of the contestants. Even though Labrada is, along with Bob Paris, considered the finest poser in the sport, the routines of Gaspari, Taylor, Quinn, and Tom Terwilliger inspired me in this show. Gaspari, whose posing has gotten better with each outing, had one terrific routine in Italy. Some of the credit must go to his sweetheart Kelly, who worked with Gaspari on this one. Hey, Rich, you're in good hands here. Taylor followed Gaspari's powerful performance with the slow, classic routine that had people buzzing in New York at the NOC. Vince's movements meshed perfectly with the tone of his song, highlighting the strength of his physique, as is the purpose. Quinn's exhibition brought tears to my eyes. This has been one tough year for Mike, who lost his 19-year-old sister Kathleen in April and then spent a month in a drug rehab center following the tragedy. Mike's tape began with a few words of dedication to his late sibling and then revved up to Welcome to the Jungle, where Mike set the crowd on fire. This guy is truly a delight to watch every time he sets foot on stage. A real competitor, a true showman. Terwilliger's routine had fine moments as far as competitions go. Although he didn't get one call out during the judging, He took the crowd in hand Saturday with his lively presentation, and he was beaming with the results afterward. Yet there is some satisfaction even when you don't place, huh, Tom? After all the athletes got to strut their stuff and a couple of aerobic dance groups did their thing, it was time to give the fans what they wanted, the results. First, 10th through 7th spots were announced. Love took the 10th place medal as expected, but when Benut's name was called out for the 9th spot, the audience got mad. Again, Samir was tight, and he looked much better on Saturday than on Friday when the decisions were made. Even the Lion admitted to that. Buchanan was selected for the 8th position, 1 spot below a jolted Quinn, who broke down backstage after the contest. Ironically, the last 4 men in the top 10 in this year's contest placed exactly 1 position higher in 1988. As was surmised the night earlier, the top 6 who remained on stage for the pose down were Haney, Benaziza, Taylor, Labrada, Christian, and Gaspari. Judging by the callouts 24 hours earlier, there was no telling who would land where. Christian, who placed 4th 2 years ago before sitting out the 88 show, was first to be disillusioned when he was cited for the 6th position. His expression told the story of his feelings on the matter. Benaziza was then announced in the 5th spot, quite an improvement from his 11th place finish of a year ago. As mentioned earlier, this cat had loads of muscle and certainly displayed it during a final call-out with Haney at the prejudging. And then there were 4. The most surprised person in the house was Gaspari when his string of second-place finishes was snapped with a 4th place medal. On Saturday morning, Gaspari had said he was sure he made the top 3, that it was a real battle for first between himself, Haney, and Labrada. But the judges obviously felt, like most of us, that the added weight didn't do Gaspari the justice he had hoped, which resulted in his 4th place spot, the lowest Gaspari's finished in his 5 Mr. O attempts. Taylor, who was as usual, had spent the whole week telling everyone why he could never end up in the top 6, was credited with a marvelous Olympia debut when Wayne D'Amelia called his name into the microphone as the 3rd place winner. No way he could best the likes of Gaspari, Christian, and the other guys who've already been there. Come on, Vince. Enough of the modesty act. If you can get harder and add some thickness to your pecs, 1st place is not out of your grasp. And even you will admit to that, won't you? D'Amelia had Haney and Labrada on edge, as well as the fans, when he announced, in 2nd place is Lee Labrada. Although it was Labrada's finest finish yet, he was 4th last year, 3rd in 87. Lee couldn't hide his disappointment with the decision. He said in the past that a man shouldn't win a contest just because he's bigger. Juxtapose one of my pitchers to the same size as the other guys, and I'm even bigger, he told me a few months back. Labrada does have a physique that comes as close to total balance as there is in the sport. His point is well taken, however. The judges still felt that Haney's overpowering, wide-as-a-mountain presence was enough to score another easy victory, one that pens his name in the record books next to Arnold's. In the final countdown, Haney amassed 23 points, only 3 off a perfect score, while Labrada totaled 44. Taylor, with 60 points, was a clear-cut choice in 3rd, 36 points ahead of Gaspari. Bertil Fox, who was in relatively good shape, landed in 11th, followed by Francis Penfato in 12th, Austria's Andreas Munzer in 13th, Bob Paris in 14th, and Albert Beckles in 15th. Let me take a moment to whine about one overlooked guy. Without question, Munzer was the best conditioned athlete in the show. When a guy says he's shredded, look at Andreas and then make your evaluation. In most cases, it's been the best conditioned athletes who have been winning shows or at least placing high. How in the world this guy couldn't cut the top 10 was not only confusing to me, but to just about everyone in the house, sans the judges. Barry DeMay, who was forced to sit out the show because of his pec surgery earlier in the year, was continually raving about Munzer from his front row seat, and with good reason. Asked Neveux how Munzer looked through those powerful up-close lenses of his. Hey, Andreas, don't fret. Benaziza had a similar fate last year and moved up to 5th this time. Hang in there, stay freaky, and your dues will come. Paris, who had been ill the week before the show, looked the thinnest I've ever seen him, and he was never a threat for the top 10 spot. Although Bob said he didn't weigh himself before the contest, I'd be surprised if he was over 210 pounds. America's Dean Tornabini, Terwilliger, and Juan Marquez were all given 16th place finishes, while Pavlau Jablanicki of Czechoslovakia, India's Prem Chand, and Armando De Fonte of Italy, the crowd favorite, of course, landed in the same spot. And so, for yet another year, things haven't changed. regarding supreme ruling of the sport. Although Haney has been better, it's that much more of a tribute to the guy who can still win handily and not be at his best. For the past few years, everyone has been in agreement. The only person who can beat Lee Haney is Haney himself. If he's off, the string will be cut. Ramini proved that premise must fall by the wayside. Next year, Haney goes for his 7th straight victory, which will tie Arnold for all-time number of wins. I wouldn't bet against him. On or off, Haney has a lock on this contest. How much did Lee add to his bulging bank book for the triumph? I can't tell you, because no one would tell me. For some reason, there was no announcement of the prize money. However, since the show brought $55,000 to Lee last year, let's assume that it's at least as lucrative this time. And before I say arrivederci, please pass the dessert tray one more time, will you? I got a station wagon and then a plane to catch. 89 Mr. Olympia results. First, Lee Haney. Second, Lee Labrada. Third, Vince Taylor. Fourth, Rich Gaspari. Fifth, Mohammed Benaziza. Sixth, Mike Christian. Seventh, Mike Quinn. Eighth, Brian Buchanan. Ninth, Samir Banut. 10th, Ron Love. 11th, Bertil Fox. 12th, Francis Benfato. 13th, Andreas Munzer. 14th, Bob Paris. 15th, Albert Beckles. 16th, Armando Defante, Prem Chand, Dean Tornabini, Tom Terwilliger, Pavlov Jablanicki, and Juan Marquez. The end.